Okay, here we go. We're going to take a closer look at these 5 tools that sit beneath our histogram in the Develop module here on our right-hand panel in Lightroom 3. We've got 5 separate tools here. If I hover my cursor over each one of them, you can see that the pop-up menu identifies what they are. This is the crop tool, and the tool next to it is the spot removal tool. We also have the red eye removal tool, which I think we'll get a pop-up there in a minute, maybe not. We have our neutral density tool or graduated filter. I interchanged the name. It's really a graduated filter, but you can use it as a neutral density as well. And we're going to explore that one in the next steps here. And of course we have our adjustment brush that we can use to do selected targeted adjustments in our images. Okay, so right now we're going to focus on the graduated neutral density filter right here on this panel, and it basically behaves just like a traditional graduated filter. It starts off dark on one end and gradually will get lighter as it moves across the pane of our image, and we can set this up. Once we get the hang of how this tool really operates, it's really quite a handy, nifty little device. So let's get going here by clicking and turning on the graduated filter, and immediately you see that the panel changes to give us some select controls for this particular tool. Let's examine those a little closer. Okay, taking a look at these effects here, you can see we've got exposure, brightness, contrast, saturation, clarity, and sharpness. And believe it or not, this graduated filter can affect each one of these images or each one of these states independently or in any combination. We're going to keep it pretty simple right now. We're going to just start with exposure, which by far is the most common use of a graduated or neutral density filter. It affects the exposure. So let's take a look at that. Right now it's defaulted to about 1.25 stops under. And what we do is once we've get the tool selected, which it is right now, move our cursor over the image and we can immediately start to click and drag across the image, and you can see these parallel lines expand and retract as we expand that graduated filter across the image, and you can immediately see the effect that it has on the image. It's going from dark to lighter, and we can stretch that out or compress it in to affect specific areas of the image. Let's take a look at what these controls do. This is the nodal point for the tool itself. If we want to turn the tool on or off, we have to select that nodal point, which will give us the opportunity to affect changes to our tool's actions. The cursor will change as we hover over each of these lines. The grabber hand changes as we hover over the extended line on the far right or the far left, and it also changes over the center line to a curved arrow, which if we click on, we can rotate and set up the orientation of the filter. If we put the cursor over the extreme far right or far left lines, we can expand and contract the effect of the filter. If we want to reposition the entire filter to a different area, then we grab it on the central node and we can move the filter wherever we care to over the image. You can see how this effect works. Let's turn it a little bit more horizontal. Let's expand it down. And let's move it around a little bit. Up, down, so forth. Let's rotate it. Bring it around, and now we've got it on the right side of the image. You can see how the graduated filter effect is in play. Let's contract this a bit. Let's move this up a little bit and get just the right amount of positioning that we may feel is appropriate for the image. Tremendous control. It takes a little practice to get the feel for it, but those are the basic controls of the tool. Once you've got your tool positioned and the effect you want, and you're pleased with the effect that you've got, the big thing here is to make sure that you turn off the tool to select it and lock it in. Okay, so we've turned off the tool and we take a look at our image and we go, you know what, we need to make an update. I'm not quite satisfied with the results I've got. We've got to go back in and do that. So what we'll do is we'll click the tool back on and get that graduated filter little menu bar to slide back down. And to activate the tool, we're going to go in and we're going to click on the node itself. We get back our parallel lines and we can go in here and make some adjustments. And I think just for argument's sake, let's make an adjustment. I'm going to twirl this around and affect the lower half of the image instead. And then I'm going to click on my node itself and reposition this off to the side a little bit. Rotate this a little bit more. And now I've got a graduated filter coming up from the lower left up into the pane of the image. A little bit unorthodox as far as using graduated filters for the most part. Generally they're used to bring the exposure of a sky, which is very bright, down to match the foreground. In this case, I'm using it to give me a little bit of a vignetting effect and also to take down some of the more overexposed background in the lower left-hand corner of this image to neutralize it out. I think I like that a little bit better. I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to turn the tool back off now by clicking on it, and the slider drawer goes back up. And I think I like that result just a little bit better. Okay, moving right along, as I've mentioned earlier, there are a number of creative effects that you can have an effect on using this tool. So let's turn back on that graduated filter, get that slider drawer to slide back down, and take a look at some of the other options we've got. Exposure being the #1 option, of course, for a neutral density or graduated filter to be used. But guess what? We can also get some interesting results and sometimes some very creative results by instituting some of these other effect options that we have here, such as saturation. Let's take a look here. Let's turn back on our graduated filter. We'll use this present orientation for this example, and let's just take our saturation and desaturate the image and take a look at what's happening in the lower left hand corner. We've taken the color out in a graduated way across the face of this image. We could go in here and extend that by extending out that graduated filter and getting some very interesting effects. So we've got a lot of things that can go on here. I'm going to neutralize that back to normal by double clicking on the node over here in our panel. Let's try something like brightness. We can, again, brightness is very closely attuned to exposure. We could take our brightness and radically darken by going to a negative side by sliding our slider to the left, or brighten up that area a lot more, overcompensate and literally blow it right out by sliding it over to the right. So again, tremendous control. You'll also have some effects, maybe not so obvious, more subtle effects using contrast or clarity, and even sharpness. You could have a graduatedly sharp to not so sharp effect across the pane of the image. So there's lots of things going on here creatively utilizing this graduated filter. And we'll explore another image and show some other ways with which this filter can be used. Okay, so let's turn the filter off right now, and let's go over here and select another image, a new image that's got a sky and a foreground, and a sky that's pretty well blown out. And I think this is a pretty obvious example of how these neutral density graduated filters can be used. So I'm going to turn my filter back on here. I'm going to put my cursor over the top and just drag straight down, and immediately you can see, because it's defaulted to a -1 1/4 stops on the exposure, we're already getting some interesting sky effects right away. I could drag this across the whole thing, but I'm not having much effect in the foreground, and actually I don't want to affect the foreground particularly, but I do want to affect the sky. So without getting too crazy here, I'm going to position it right about there or so. And let's see, maybe I'll just squeeze that up a little bit more and move this down a little bit and make this a little bit more abrupt, like so. Now, we've got a pretty good modeling of the sky by using this filter. I can go in here and tweak this effect, of course, by decreasing my exposure even more, which we're getting a little overblown here, so we'll back off a little bit. I could use brightness to bring it down a little bit, but we're introducing a little too much gray in my sky, and I don't like that, so I'll just back that off. That could be it. Now, this is a neutral density graduated filter, and I underscore the word neutral. There is no color tint in this filter. But let's suppose we want to add some color to this. We can do that. We've got a color option down here, and right now you can see that there's an X through this box, meaning that there's no color tint affected on this filter. Let's turn that on by clicking on it, and we've got a rainbow of colors to choose from. Let's select something that might work with this particular toned, sepia toned image here. Probably something in the very warm yellow, orange, or red area. Let's take our eyedropper here, hover over this area, and give it a click, and immediately we can see a pretty interesting result to our sky. Opens up all sorts of creative possibilities. We can move this around and watch the sky change until we find the color tone that we think we're happy with. And it could be almost anything. We could go radically in a different direction and change the color completely. I think we should keep it in the warm family, so I'm going to keep it somewhere over here, intensified a little bit, and look at that. Color. We can introduce color to this neutral density filter or graduated filter and have a blast colorizing and affecting and getting really creative with our images. Not a bad tool at all. Click off of it to lock it in. Click off our graduated filter and we lock in the effect, and there you have it. Wonderful tool. We'll take a look at a third image and see what else we can do with this really cool tool. Okay, we're going to take a look at one more image here and have some fun with this. This is a lighthouse here out here in Tarrytown off the Hudson River. I'm going to click on my R key to show that I've already cropped this image a little bit, but you know what? I'm going to undo that and show the foreground here, which is basically a bare parking lot. But it is a good example for what we want to do with this graduated neutral density filter. So I'm going to keep the image uncropped. We've got a lot of sky to work with here, and we've got a little lighthouse here sitting up on the edge of the river, and we're going to turn on our graduated filter, and of course I'm going to hit the sky for starters, bring it down, and see about bringing some tone and tonality into that sky, like so. I'm going to add a little color to it this time. I'm going to add a little blue to make it a little bit more rich than it was. Let's see if we can find something here that's reasonably believable. That looks pretty good. Let's go with that. And now I'm going to turn that particular filter off, and I'm going to actually go back in a second time, and I'm going to start at the bottom this time and just bring that foreground into play. Tame it down just a little bit, and now we've got two filters working in tandem, one at the top, one at the bottom. And you know what? I'm going to turn that off by clicking on it, go back in, and with a new filter I'm going to add a third coming in from the left. My goodness, this gets a little crazy, and let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I kind of like that. It's really isolating our lighthouse. I'm going to add one more, of course, on the right hand side and just bring it across like so. And my goodness, we've got 4 filters in play, and we've basically surrounded our lighthouse with an array of graduated densities, 1 with color, 3 that are neutral. Just another example of some of the really creative effects you can get just utilizing this one tool. And that's just the graduated filter working with exposure. We didn't really introduce any of these other effects other than color down here on our sky. So we can really go crazy here. Why don't we go down here and activate that parking lot area and add some color to it. Let's see if we go in here and add, warm it up a little bit with some red or orange or yellow, like so. How about that? There we go. Let's turn it off. Here we are. Pretty wild. Have some fun with it.